Hello everyone, welcome to another patron voted review. This month's selection is Crisis Wing, a new indie shmup available on Steam. I checked to see if it was available on itch.io since that's the place I'm going to buy indie shmups moving forward. This one does not have an itch version, that's alright, so I went ahead and got it on Steam. It is an old school style shmup, definitely if you're a fan of the Sega Genesis shmups, Caravan shmups, stuff like Truxton and that sort of thing. This will be right up your alley because it is old school to the bones, very faithful to that, with some good care and attention though that avoids a lot of the pitfalls of the older shmups. And so in my opinion, I actually like this game a lot and probably enjoy it a bit more than the games it is emulating, or not emulating, but the games it's inspired by, just because it does make some nice concessions. For example, instant bombing system. Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So I'll talk about the gameplay in a bit more. But let's begin by actually talking about the more surface elements like the graphics and the music and that sort of thing. So I think the graphics of this game are solid, but especially the later stages, those are the ones that I think were better done than the earlier stages. They just add a little bit more oomph. They have more effects. The backgrounds look a little bit better. The bosses look awesome. The enemies look awesome. The bullet patterns look really great. This game has excellent bullet design, especially the further you get in the game. One little issue with it though is sometimes the bullets match the backgrounds a little bit too much. Like there's a stage that has a green background and green bullets, and sometimes it can be a little bit hard to distinguish that. So maybe that's something they might want to check and change the color of the back, or change the color of the bullets. If if it's a green bullet, change it to like blue or something like that. But the graphics overall I think are very good. I think the weakest aspect of this game probably are the graphics, just because I think the gameplay is so excellent and well done. If they could improve these graphics just a little bit more, I think it could help the game a lot. And what I mean by improve it, I don't mean they need to like redesign the whole game or anything like that. But when you look at the later stages, they have a little bit more effects going on. They have a little bit more polish in like the backgrounds and those types of things. I think if they could apply that to some of the earlier stages as well, that could go a long way. Just they have the kind of like old school. I like this though, where it has like the sides and then the background down below, like you're flying above a canyon or whatever. So it reminds me a lot of Battle Garega. Stage 1 has that as well. The difference is that in Battle Garega, if you look at Battle Garega, the city down there is actually a little bit animated, like there's lights moving and stuff like that. I think if they could make those little bit of touches to the backgrounds where they add some animation onto them a little bit, I think it would help a lot to make the game feel more vibrant and a little bit more alive with the backgrounds and the graphics. So, and I feel like, if they ever did an update, that's something they could add in, right? So that's a thing I'm pointing out. Maybe just add a little bit more background animation and stuff to the graphics. Add a little bit more polish there. But overall, the enemy design, the ship design, the bullet design, I like all of it. Very faithful kind of to what they're going for, but also not, but it also has its own unique style, which I think is really good. So those are the graphics, very well done for the most part. I think the music is solid. It doesn't have any really powerful standout tracks that make you like a Futari or something like that, but at the same time, for an indie shmup and for this style of shmup, because there's a lot of gameplay on hand, very well done music. It never got boring or annoying, and I've played this game for about 8 hours now, so that's a compliment for sure. And I don't think the games that it's drawing too much inspiration from, like Truxton or anything like that, have great music. Maybe the Genesis people will get mad at me for that, but so I don't think it's too much of an issue or anything like that. Solid music overall. So then I guess we'll talk a little bit about the extra elements. So it has a training mode. I appreciate that. A stage select. It doesn't have any like boss selection, and the stages are super long. So I kind of feel like they could add some checkpoints to the training mode, because the game itself actually has checkpoints, which is really cool. When you continue, it has a really nice checkpoint system. And so I feel like, okay, it's already there. If you guys just work it a little bit into the training mode, I think that would go a long way. But it's not too big of a deal, but I think that could be a little bit of improvement. But shoutouts for having the stage select. I'm glad they have that. They also have a time attack mode. Time attack mode is pretty cool. I didn't want to get too much into it because there's so much footage. The game is so long and there's so much footage. I didn't want to take too much from the main game footage. But yeah, time attack mode's really cool. If you're into those caravan ports on the Saturn and stuff like that, you'll be right at home with that. And then the UI is good. There's no scanline features, I don't think, but it has rotation and everything like that, which makes me happy. Good button config and all that sort of thing. So let's get into the meat of it now. Let's talk about the gameplay. Like I said, this game is a real throwback to those older style shmups, and it's done in a way where you can tell the developers knew what they were doing. They're very familiar with the source material, and they made just the right amount of changes to kind of update it for modern sensibilities, but also being very old school with the game flow and the game feel, and it feels like you're playing an old game. It doesn't feel like you're playing an homage to an old game. It feels like you're playing an old game with just some tweaks. So the power-up system is pretty cool once you kind of understand how it works. So you got 3 power-ups: the missiles, the spread shot, the power shot. From my experience, I never had any luck with those missiles. I feel like they're the worst power-up, and I avoid them like the plague. I'm assuming they do a good amount of damage, but they have this kind of weird delay. And just with the game design, I feel like the missiles are the weakest. I'm sure I'm going to be proven wrong by some super player who like figures out how to break them. But in my experience, I really struggled with the missiles. The power and the spread I felt were both very solid and kind of interchangeable as far as which one you want to use. The spread's a little bit better for the stages, and the power is a little bit better for the boss fights. The thing about the power-up system is that it is very punishing if you drop your power-ups, because it takes, I think, 6 of the same color. You have to keep collecting the same color to powering up, by the way. That's a little hit tip for you. And you have to think I collect up to like 6 of the same color or something like that to get the full power-up. And so if you die, you drop that, and it takes quite a bit. You know, leveling up in this game is actually meaningful, right? It's not like most bullet hells where you die and you pick up your power-ups, you keep moving. You're dying and losing your power-ups in this game, like an older shmup, like in Musha or something like that, is a big deal. So I think that's definitely adds a lot to the momentum feel of this old school shmup, where old school shmups are like, don't die, basically, because once you die, recovery is super hard or pretty challenging. This game mitigates it a bit with the bombing system, which I appreciate a lot, which is basically a cave-style instant bomb. Thank you, because I think it helps alleviate that Gradius syndrome where you die and, okay, now I need to reset. And just because the game is so long and has a lot of stuff ahead of you, an endurance test for sure, I think having that added addition of the bombing system was a godsend, basically, because this game would be brutal without it, I'll say that much. So the enemy patterns are very interesting because I don't play that many old school shmups, so it took me a little bit of time to get used to it, but I was like, okay, I think the enemy patterns are very well done. They have that old schoolish feel where they're sort of locked in, but they're also just so quick moving and kind of a little bit unpredictable in a way that you have to like memorize the patterns a good amount to get through the game, especially the later stages. Again, it's a really fine line between a really good old school shmup and kind of like a crappy old school shmup. And this game nails it. It has great old school style patterns. So if you're a fan of those, you know, Truxton and those types of things, I think this game, it's for you on that part for sure. The boss fights are really interesting because when I first started playing the game, I thought the boss fights were kind of crappy at first. Like my first hour playing the game, I was like, okay, these are a little bit rudimentary. What I did not understand is that this game has 7 stages and lots of boss fights, and the boss fights, it's like an endurance test. It's not necessarily like a cave style boss fight where you have to like figure out all these intricate movements and manipulations and all those types of things. Instead, these boss fights have pretty straightforward strategies on how to defeat them, but it's like, can you repeat this? And so the boss fights go on a good amount of time, even when you're fully powered up. And it's kind of like an endurance, like I mentioned before. This is like a test of will. Can you dodge this pattern 7 times, 8 times? How many times can you dodge the pattern? And so what's interesting is you're routing mostly for like consistently setting up not only one pattern dodges, but between the patterns, which isn't really a thing with bullet hells, right? You don't really worry about, okay, I dodged the first pattern, and now I need to set up for the second pattern immediately, right? There's usually a lot more downtime between patterns and bullet hells, and like in Toho, right? They have like little cutscenes and stuff between the patterns. But in this game, it's not just about can you dodge the pattern now. It's like, can you set up for the next pattern? How do you position? And you can get caught in between the patterns and die. And I think that's very old school. So I think the boss fights are very well done. It's just you need to play the game a little bit more to start to kind of dawn into that. But the later stage boss fights are just objectively great. I was having a lot of fun with those. So speaking of boss fights, I do want to mention that I think the ship speed of this game is absolutely perfect. It's fast enough to get you where you need to go, but it's slow enough to help you dodge the more intricate patterns later on in the game. I can imagine that the developers spent a good amount of time honing in the speed. I might be wrong, but I feel like it's just right. I think I could play at a little bit of a higher speed, but I could see for most players this being the ideal speed of the ship. So great job on that. Again, just all these little details. That's the thing about Crisis Wing that I guess I want to communicate in this review, is that overall, when you look at it like in that trailer, when you look at it from a distance, you could say, oh, this is, and you know, this is above average shmup, this is a good shmup. But once you really start playing it and you just start noticing all the small details and how they weave together, you realize, okay, this is a really well done game. They keep a lot of things in mind, and they mitigate things that could be problems, and they add things that are solutions. It's just hard to pick up on those until you put hours into the game. Another thing I want to comment on, of course, is the scoring system. So Caravan-style shmups tend to have, you know, kind of pretty bare bones scoring systems, at least from my experience with them. I think Batsugun special, that's like why Batsugun special version or whatever exists, right? To add in like a scoring system basically. And this game's scoring system I like a lot. It's very simple and straightforward, which is kill stuff effectively, but also collect Garega style medals. And I think the way they added the medals into the game, they definitely are more forgiving than Garega medals, because Garega medals, the better you do, the further you get, the faster they fall. And they're a little bit chaotic and stuff. I think these medals are a little bit easier to predict, a little bit easier to route out, and they also fall slower, and you generally have a easier time picking them up, which I appreciate, because this is like Garega, but it's also older school where it's all about endurance. And I think that's what I'm going to be emphasizing in this review, is that this is a game of endurance. And I actually did not get the 1cc. I played it for 7 hours, and I came real close. The footage you see here, I got up to the final boss. I'm going to get the 1cc at some point here. It's hard to explain, where the game isn't overwhelming you really all that often. It doesn't overwhelm you, but it just pushes you and pushes you and pushes you. Speeds up just a little bit more, speeds up just a little bit more, to the point where you just make that one slip up and then you die and you're like, damn it. Yeah, I think it's very well done. Excellent difficulty curve for old school shmups. I feel like if you're kind of new to shmups and you want an old school style one, definitely this was a great way to get started in the genre. It has a very nice difficulty curve, and apparently this game loops infinitely. I know there was a second loop, because we know when you get to the second loop, but I was like, okay, I'm not beating the second loop here, because each loop is like almost an hour long. It's a long game in one loop, so I was like, okay, well, I'll leave the second loop to those who are interested. But apparently, according to comments on my Discord, it like loops infinitely, which is pretty nuts. Again, very Caravan style there, right? And so yeah, that's pretty much my review overall. A strong recommend from me. You'll definitely, if you start playing it and you feel like, okay, I'm not quite getting it, keep going, and it'll click for you. Thanks so much to my patrons. Let me shout them out. So thank you to Dingo, Andy Capt, Anthony A, Ben Win, Corio, Eric H, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Kiwi, JB RPG, Joe Angelo, Game Boy Guru, K, Malaise, Mark Toms, Martin Worrell, Maz, Meher Kalendrian, Nathaniel Davis, Queen Charlene, and Electron, Okla Kugels, Smacky Factors, Sugumo, Plasmo, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.